Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cedric Black podcast. And I am your host, Cedric Black. On today's episode, we'll be diving into a topic that may surprise many of you, because it definitely surprised me. What I mean is noise pollution and the way that it's somehow connected to sales tactics, to the sales industry. But before I move forward, just imagine this sound. Just imagine sitting in a room and you're surrounded by this sound here. But before you think that this is just another episode about it's the normal things that we always talk about, traffic noise or neighbors or lawnmowers and airplanes and all the sounds that we don't want, that all the sounds that irritate us in some way, all the sounds that disturb our peace. Yeah, again, that's definitely what noise pollution is. For those of you that may be listening for the first time, noise pollution is just that. It's unwanted noise or unwanted sounds that disturb your peace in some way. And those things are just a few examples of the sources of noise pollution. I failed to mention trucks and traffic and 18-wheeler trucks and the noise that they make, buses, the list goes on and on. But think about this. I just played you an example of a crowded room, and all of us have been there. We've all been stuck in some situation that's just way too loud for us. Maybe it's a crowded restaurant where you can barely hear yourself think, the way I was when I mentioned back a few episodes back when my wife and I went to have a nice dinner. It was so loud in there, we could hardly even hear each other. Or maybe there's a concert that you've attended where the music just vibrates your chest. It's just, you feel it through your entire body. I've been there. And again, I used to like that when I was younger, but I don't want that now. But think about this. What if I told you that those really loud and chaotic environments can actually manipulate our minds in some way? I believe so. And why? I'm about to let you know something I discovered. There's a whole science behind how sensory overload that's caused by excessive noise can mess with our decision making. And guess who knows this? Guess who knows this all too well? Salespeople. The people that's involved in the sales industry. Today, that's what I'll be exploring. It's what I'll be talking about on today's episode, the psychology of noise as it relates to sales tactics that salespeople use. I'll talk about how these noisy environments can create a sense of urgency for us. It creates a sense of urgency and pressure that makes us more likely to agree to something that we might regret later on. Recently, I had an experience that opened my eyes to how noise pollution can show up in unexpected places that you never even think about, and even be used to manipulate your mind in some way. Now, I'm not talking about it like a magic show or some type of illusion or something like, but I mean a sales presentation. I've never thought about it this way. You see, this past weekend I went to a timeshare presentation. Now, of course, I never buy into timeshares, and it's nothing that I would never see myself doing for my own reasons. Now, if those of you that do purchase timeshares for your own reasons, I'm not knocking you for doing that. That's just something that I don't do. it was just part of a little vacation getaway package that we had presented to us to get some free gifts and get some discounts on some things if we attended this 90-minute presentation. So I told my wife, I said, sure, we can do that. It's just 90 minutes. We'll hear them out. We know we're going to say no anyway, but we'll hear them out and we'll be on our way. But here's the thing though, it wasn't really a peaceful environment for making a big decision. It wasn't for me or for us. So imagine being crammed up into a big cafe, like it was I guess it was the dining room area of the hotel. And surely there was about 100 other people there. And all of them were having their own sales pitches going on. So we were in tables. We were sitting at table. It was my wife and I, and then we had a salesperson in front of us giving us the pitch. And every table beside us, all around that room, had the same thing. Some of them had more because some people had their children there with them, so their tables were full. So all of us crammed into this room, and I hear all these conversations taking place. There's a constant buzz of people talking. Everybody's conversation was overlapping, and you're trying to focus on the salesperson sitting in front of you, what she's saying, everything that she's saying, in the way that she's explaining things, and she's speaking quick, she's speaking fast. That's what we call sensory overload, because my brain was just about to explode. And the funny thing is, as I was just struggling to hear and think straight in this environment, I started to wonder if that was the point. I started thinking, is this something that's pre-calculated by the company? Could all the noise be a deliberate tactic used by salespeople? Do they do this on purpose? I think so now. I believe so now in looking back, because when we got there, our appointment was 9 o'clock. And I'm wondering now as I think back, is it from the beginning when we first made the appointment? We are giving specific times, 9 o'clock or 11, or it was specific times that we chose. So we chose 9 o'clock just to get in first thing in the morning and get out and have the rest of our day to enjoy. But when we got there, the first thing that we saw was a line of people outside, lined up outside. There were that many other families or couples there. We walked into chaos. It was already chaotic, just in the waiting area or just being in line. And now I'm already frustrated. And then you move into the dining area where we're all crammed up. That made it worse. All the noise that surrounded me. And I couldn't wait to escape. So I'll be talking about the science behind this sensory overload and how the noise levels can make us feel stressed and overwhelmed, because I was, and eager to just escape that situation. You as well as me, you may be surprised to learn how this can be used to influence decisions, especially in a high pressure sales environment. I was very surprised because it was so loud. Hundreds of people crammed into a cafe, everybody talking at once. People were eating, so you hear silverware, plates clattering. You hear all of that, other salespeople yelling across the room at each other. And it was really impossible just to even hear myself think, let alone try to focus on some big financial decision like buying a timeshare. But we were going to say no anyway, because we just don't do that. And I just don't think that all that noise was an accident. I think the whole thing was purposely done to rush people to make decisions, to manipulate them to make a decision that they may regret later on, what they will regret later on. So I mentioned sensory overload, and it seems like every episode I'm always mentioning a topic that you should learn, because the reason I mention something new, because as I learn, I try to help you learn as well. We know what it is, but we just never heard the term. Well, I just never hear the term so often. I did some research just to make sure that all my facts are factual when I record the episode. So what exactly is sensory overload? So imagine your brain, our brain has a giant control room, and every sense that we have, like our sight, our sound, touch, smell, our taste, the way we taste food, imagine all of those senses constantly sending out information to this control room, which is our brain. Now, if we're in a relaxing, calm environment, our brain can efficiently process all these inputs and make sense of everything that's going on around us. But here's the catch. Now, if all of a sudden our control room gets flooded with too much information, like being bombarded by a lot of loud noises and flashing lights, strong smells, all these things at one time, that's sensory overload. The brain gets overwhelmed and is trying to keep up with the information that it's receiving, and things start to just go haywire. And I was reading that there were some studies that shown that sensory overload can trigger the release of stress hormones like cortisol. And I'm going to do more research on cortisol and make that part of one of the shows so we can get a good understanding of cortisol. So remember the fight or flight response that we get when we're in dangerous situations. Well, the sensory overload can trigger a similar response, even though there may be no threat at all. In actuality, it can lead to a whole cascade of negative effects, like our heart rate can increase, we can start sweating and have difficulty breathing, even have headaches. Now, in that situation from the timeshare presentation, I had headache, and the sweating was I wasn't really just sweating, but it was warm in there. For some people feel suffocated when there's a lot of people around. So I could see that happening. I think that environment was designed to be that way. But also, when we're talking about sensory overload, it doesn't just stop right there. It can also mess with our brain function, our cognitive reasoning. When we're in such a loud environment, trying to focus on certain things become really difficult. Our memory can get fuzzy, or we can forget about making clear decisions. And I think that's what salespeople want you to do. They want you to not make a clear decision. People that are exposed to high-level noises tend to make poor choices. Even opting for immediate rewards over long-term benefits, they will make poor choices because you can't think clearly. So the next time you are part of a noisy environment, or you're in a noisy environment, keep this in mind. Your brain might be under attack, and your decision making could be compromised. Even though mine wasn't, ours was not compromised because we were going to say no anyway. So now that we hopefully got a good understanding of how sensory overload messes with our brains, I wonder how this knowledge can be used for salespeople in their world. Because I've noticed that some sales pitches happen in loud environments. As I think back, this weekend really opened my eyes to that, because now I think back to all the times that maybe I bought a car or was in some situation where I had to make a purchase that required a lot of thinking. It was a little noisy. I just don't think that it's random now. I think that it's designed to be that way. And salespeople understand the psychology of noise. I believe that they take classes or training, or during their training, that using noise in the high pressure environment helps them achieve their sale. Because for the customer, it creates a sense of urgency, and it pushes us to make a quick decision because we want to escape the environment. We're ready to go. And I think it's also the time is stretched out for a long period of time, because our presentation was, on paper, it was 90 minutes. Well, we didn't go too far over the 90 minutes, because I kept reminding the salesperson, hey, we're on the timer. You guys said 90 minutes. You said 90 minutes when we started, so let's keep that 90 minutes. Just think about sometimes if you feel overwhelmed and stressed by noise, we may agree to something just to escape that situation. It's like saying yes just to get the salesperson off your back. And even if you don't fully understand the details of what's going on, because I was ready to leave and my wife was ready to leave. But I think they know this. They bombard you with all the information. You're surrounded by all this noise. So that environment that you're in, you just want to escape it. And I think part of their tactic is to rely on you making a quick decision so you can move on. So think about it. How often do you ask a clarifying question or negotiate effectively when you can barely hear yourself think? Probably not as much as you would in a much calmer or relaxing environment. In the noisy environment, your focus narrows. It becomes smaller. You become fixated on the short-term relief, like getting through the sales pitch or getting away from the environment. You become more focused on that rather than considering the long-term consequences of what you may potentially purchase. And the salesperson relies on that. You might not be thinking clearly about things like the cost or a warranty or whether you really even need the product in the first place. It's a clever tactic and it's sneaky, but unfortunately, it can be very effective to people that aren't aware of what's really happening. That's why it's so important to be aware of it, so you can protect yourself from making impulsive decisions that you might regret later on. Because noise makes it harder to focus and think clearly. And when you're in that situation, you may be less likely to ask important questions or negotiate effectively. And again, I think they know this. I think they've been trained on this. That's why we're bombarded with noise. Because when we're bombarded with noise, our brain is overloaded. And what happens is our brain prioritizes the short-term relief over long-term consequences. You just want the whole thing to be over with. And when you think that way, it can cloud your judgment and prevent you from considering the bigger picture. It's basically like playing a game where The salesperson has all the cards stacked in their favor, and the noise is their ace in the hole. It's the secret weapon that makes you more likely to make a rush decision that you regret later on. As we wrap up this episode, it was a surprising episode for you, I'm sure. It was surprising for me too, but it was necessary for me to experience it, because otherwise I would have never thought about the link between noise and sales. It is a tactic that they use. So in this episode, we learned how sensory overload that's caused by excessive noise can actually manipulate our decision making if we're not aware of it. So remember that the high pressure sales environment with all the noise might not be a coincidence. I'm just going to go out and take that a little bit further and say that it is not a coincidence. It's purposely done. I believe that it is designed to make us feel stressed and overwhelmed, to push us to make a quick decision that we might regret later on. Because salespeople are there to make the sale. And if you're a salesperson, if that's your job, I do apologize. I'm not knocking your job. I'm just discussing the tactics that I discovered that were used. Noise. But here's the best thing. Here's the good news. Like us, my wife and I, you are in control. Like we were in control. We were going to say no anyway, and we stuck with it. No matter how noisy it got, no matter how much it affected us, we were still going to say no. So don't let the combination of noise and sales tactics pressure you to make a decision that you'll regret later on. So if you ever find yourself in a situation that feels overwhelming, just remember what we discussed here in this episode. Always be mindful of your surroundings. If the noise level is unbearable, just request a quieter space for a discussion. See what happens. If you're ever in that situation, even if you go to a timeshare presentation, try that out. Ask the salesperson to move to a much quieter, maybe a private office where you can talk and discuss and see if they do that. I would be surprised if they said that there were no offices or the offices were full, or they would come up with some excuse to keep you in that environment. Because in that environment, they control. If you go to a private or a quiet place, you're more in control and you're more prone to think straighter. Also, you can take breaks just to get your focus. Go to the bathroom, step outside, and don't be afraid to just walk away if you feel pressure. What can they do? I mean, they're trying to sell to you, so if you feel overwhelmed, just walk away. The bottom line that I want to point out to you is to take your time and make informed decisions, because you deserve to be comfortable and confident before agreeing to anything. That's it for today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family who might be a victim to high pressure sales tactics. Help spread the word about the power of noise and how to be a smart and savvy consumer. And also feel free to leave a comment below and let me know what other topics related to mental health and our environment that you'd like to hear about in future episodes. Thanks for joining me today. And remember, stay healthy and stay mindful.